in honor of Mr. Torrance's alcoholism, I got a little
Oh
something here
God.
that I'm gonna pop open.
Oh yeah, we all should have like Jack Daniels for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's
I
all over my computer now. Great.
oh
Wonderful.
no. Oh no.
Mine's actually
Oh,
iced tea.
that's such a newbie mistake.
I haven't drank in a while. And it's I don't know if you guys can see it. It's zero alcohol. You can't see it, but yeah, it's not. It's one of those zero alcohol beers. It's pretty good. Have you guys tried it?
Is it? No, I
Heineken
haven't.
one's actually pretty good.
Oh.
Yeah. Susie's lying. Susie's
I
lying.
snorted. No, I snorted. It was like,
So Susie, your screenings are soon. Are you excited?
yes.
Yes, that was a long pause, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's because like I am excited for a variety of reasons. I always like seeing it with an audience and the reactions, like the
Yeah.
tone
I'm
of
sure
the
it's fun,
audience
right?
is kind of different every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody's so supportive. It's like
Yeah.
anybody who has shit to say about the movie never really speak up, you know, it's just all sort of a lot of love, and it's like
Yeah.
it's needed and welcome.
That's very cool. Yeah. I love the supportive atmosphere of those like film festivals, especially like the smaller, more intimate ones. It's really nice. It's really nice. You get to meet really cool
Gotcha,
people
yeah.
there. Yeah. It's and they're all like film lovers and yeah, for our viewers who aren't in the know, our friend Susie Moon, she made a film. It's called Darla in
Mm.
Space. It's a terrific film that involves a sentient, orgasm-granting yeast mass. Sounds like fun. It's one of the funniest films I've seen. It will be screening in New York as part of the Bushwick Film Festival on October 28th at 8 p.m., as well as in LA for the Downtown LA Film Festival on November 4th at 3:30 p.m. I'll leave all of the info, ticket info, in the description down below. Please do check it out. It's a really great film. Susie will be there, and some of her cast and crew will be there as well. Susie, right? Eric will be there. Eric
Yeah,
LaPlante, the director, will be there.
Eric's
So
there, Alex is
yeah,
there, who plays Darla.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Go
fun
have a great
times.
time. Yeah, super fun. So that's next Saturday, week after next, right?
Mm,
For the
yeah,
Bushwick one, for the Bushwick screening, and
yes,
then
yeah.
the following Saturday, November 4th, for the one in downtown LA. So check it out, guys. You'll have a lot of fun. So now let's talk about The Shining. I'm sure Dom has a lot to say because it's one of my favorite films of all time. And I think it's one of the greatest horror films of all time, maybe one of the great films of all time. So I'm really excited to see what you guys have to say. If you guys see something bad, then I don't know. I'm gonna have to reconsider our friendship. Joking, but not really joking. Um, so this was directed by the late great Stanley Kubrick, released in 1980. Um, loosely based, very loosely based on the book by Stephen King. I actually think it has nothing to do with the book. I think they're completely different stories. Um,
Have you read the book, Soul?
yeah, I have like 20 years ago, but I have, and I remember it. And I remember it. Yeah, I just don't think it has anything to do with the movie. I think they're completely different stories. Have you
Interesting.
read has anyone here read the book?
No, I
No?
haven't.
Okay.
Nope.
I love Stephen King. No, haven't
You
read
do you
Shining.
really? Yeah, and
I love Stephen King.
we'll talk a little bit about that. He hated the film. He hated the film because it had nothing to do with
Uh-huh.
his book. It was a complete. I feel like it was. They're not even cousins. I don't feel like they're like completely like they're about different things. And I think the book it's a very straightforward book. And I think Stephen King's writing is pretty straightforward. Like, would you agree, Susie? It's a pretty much like his books are just general kind of like hero's journey type books, right? Like, would you agree? They're
Yeah,
not
they
really
don't ever try
complicated.
to trick you. It's like,
Yeah.
was this all in some guy's head, or is this a ghost or not? It's sort of like it's yes, it's a ghost, or yes, it's all in their head. And
Hmm.
it never tries to trick me. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's I like some of his books, not all of them, but um yeah, I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about that too. Um Yeah, the great Stanley Kubrick. Isn't it amazing that he never won an Academy Award for his direction? Isn't that kind of crazy? Like he's like one of the
I didn't
greatest
know that.
directors, yeah, of our
Yeah,
time, and he's never. Anyway, not that
there's a
important.
long list. There's a
There is a
long
long
list
list. You're
of
right,
those
but
those filmmakers who've never won.
Yeah, but
yeah,
I
it is
think
what it
that's a
is.
good place to start. Like, would anyone on this call disagree with the statement that Kubrick is, let's say, top 10 directors of all time?
I mean, just his technical kind of contributions to film language, right? Even in this film, like there's a lot there.
Yeah.
That's pretty innovative and pretty new, and we'll talk about like the Steadicam stuff and that dissolve shot that he does that's so like iconic. Like when you see that shot, that those long dissolves, you're like, oh, when I see that in other films, I'm like, oh, it just immediately reminds me of Kubrick. But anyway, we'll talk about that. You know, uh, Kubrick is interesting too because like most of his films were panned by critics. I specifically remember this came to mind when I was thinking about The Shining and Kubrick in general. I remember what was that show? What was the show called with Ebert and Siskel and Ebert? Wasn't it called like On the Balcony
Uh,
or something? What was it called? Do you guys remember?
I always called it Siskel and Ebert, but
Maybe it's
yeah,
called Siskel and Ebert. I don't
did
know.
it have a name?
Is it like
I think it
Yeah,
at the
had
movies,
At the
maybe?
movies. I don't know,
that
something
might have
like
been
that.
it. Yeah,
And I
Yeah.
remember Roger Ebert gave Full Metal Jacket a thumbs down, and he panned the movie, saying it was
yeah,
uninteresting and unimportant. And
Unimportant.
yeah, and Gene Siskel like attacked him. He was like, "You are out of your mind. You just gave Lassie a thumbs up, and you gave this movie a thumbs down. You're crazy." And it was the first. I was like 11, and it was the first time I saw like someone challenging like a person up because Ebert had great power. Do you remember how much power he had back then? He had that syndicated TV show that was on every like Saturday or something, right? And everyone watched him, and they went to the movies that weekend just on his recommendation, on his thumbs up, right? He had so much power, and like good on Siskel. Like he was like, yeah, he was so like adamant about it, and it's the first time I saw that kind of argument on TV, and it was so surprising to me. But anyway, that's we're going kind of on a tangent, but yeah, it's interesting how like Kubrick's movies weren't really respected by critics, right? I think that's generally true. Like
Yeah, I
Clockwork
didn't know that
Orange
either.
was, yeah, Clockwork
Yeah.
Orange was like banned in a few places. It did not get good reviews
yeah.
initially. The Shining won like Razzies, right, as like worst movie of the year, and yeah, his movies were not appreciated when they came out, which is interesting. Because I think they're really powerful, urgent movies. I think The Shining is just as
Mhm.
urgent now as it was back then when it was released. So yeah, let's talk about the opening shot. You guys remember the opening shot?
That lake with the reflection and
Yeah.
the tree right in the middle, and it just is like kind of does that crazy
Mm,
disorienting thing. I just watched it this afternoon, so it's pretty fresh.
it's pretty
I
fresh,
hadn't
yeah.
seen it like beginning to end in a long time.
Yeah. Any thoughts about the opening, guys? With the music and kind of
Gorgeous.
the gorgeous. What do you think about it, Susie, in general? Like,
There's lots of reflections in the movie, so it sort of like already sets that as like a framing thing. You're going to be disoriented,
mm,
isolation, all of that. It's sort of like visually, it's sort of like preparing you for the movie to come.
yeah, absolutely. And it kind of like also like emulates the Steadicam too, right? It's a helicopter shot, right? So it's like it's gliding and it's like, I don't know, it kind of reminded me of that too, kind of. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It kind of foreshadows a little bit of what's to come. And there is that dissolve shot too. So the first cut is actually that dissolve, that long dissolve.
Mm.
Do you guys have any thoughts about the use of that dissolve? Because it's obviously it's a big kind of part of the film.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the dissolve, it does the same thing that this whole opening title sequence does, which is sort of denotes a long passage of time. So for
Hmm.
me, like not only does it establish like the beauty of it, but it really gives you the feeling that like this is really a remote place that you're going to, and it's going to be really disconnected from everywhere else, which is obviously very important to the plot. I think at some point once he gets there, he remarks like, "Oh, it only took me 3.5 hours to get here," and they're like, "Oh, that's good time." So they kind of go out of their way to tell you like, "Hey, these people are going to be disconnected in the middle of nowhere," but it does that completely visually before you ever have that line of dialogue. You know?
Hmm. What about for you, Ethan? Any just thoughts on the
Um,
opening?
yeah, you mentioned foreshadowing, and like it just fills me with this sense of dread. The music, especially, that music is very upsetting, and it's still like minor. I mean, not in like a musical way, but it's not like hitting you over the head. It's very just um and yeah, it's the like dwarfing of the scale, right? It's like this tiny car going through these, you know, beautiful kind of alien, kind of odd landscapes. Um, it just yeah, I find this movie very like upsetting. So I'm just like from minute one, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna steel myself in for 2.5 hours of this like just Kubrick like intensity. And that's what it is all something I was thinking about. I don't know if this is like an official term, but have you all ever heard of the Kubrick stare?
Yeah,
It's like the
it's in every film
face,
pretty much, right?
the face he like beats his actors down into into a pulp to get. I mean, Nicholson's doing it like pretty much from minute one in this movie. But I think the dissolves are so interesting because when you dissolve the image, you're like keeping the scene you're dissolving from, and you're going into the next scene, so you can like see the actor's face sort of disappearing, but still there, like a ghost kind of
There's like a
present in
sense of
the
like
next
permanence
scene.
there, right? Like,
Yeah, but
yeah,
but you also like you lock onto those faces, and those faces are in the dissolves, and they're like you're like okay, it's gonna fade away now, but it's still there, it lingers. So I think that stuff helps the images linger in your head because that's what this movie does. It's like taking up space.
yeah, because it is such a long dissolve that it does like it is memorable, and like I said, when I see those long dissolves in other movies, like my mind immediately goes to The Shining. So it's interesting.
Mm.
The music, how do you guys feel about the music? Ethan touched on it. So it's by Wendy Carlos and Rachel Elkind. And it's based on like a medieval 13th century funeral chant. Um, and they kind of remixed it with synths and remade it with synths. And I believe Elkin did like the whooping voices that are so creepy. I think the music in general is really good. No?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking when I watched it this time most recently, which was actually, by the way, the time that I've enjoyed it the most out of all the many times I've seen it. I've
Oh
probably seen it
yeah.
like I don't know, some have seen 6 and 10 times. But there were some scenes where Jack Nicholson is being Jack Nicholson and doing his thing and being out there. And I was thinking to myself this time, if it wasn't for this music and the cinematography, this would be laughably bad, right? But instead, it worked really well because of those two elements. Like it's shot so well and lit so well, and the music is so good that like I'm totally in on this and it's freaking me out. But like if you pulled that out, like I was just thinking watching the dailies of this were probably hilarious because this guy, it's just like a guy like gesticulating and moving randomly and making these faces and doing things with his tongue down the hall. And I was just like, this could so easily be hilarious. And like I could see like that being the sort of Razzie interpretation in a way,
Yeah.
because he is very over the top,
He is
like
over the top. You're right.
from the beginning in some ways that you could potentially have issue with,
But isn't that
but
the
ultimately
point?
work in an amazing way.
Isn't that the point for it
It
to be over the top since the very beginning? Then this is what I mean by it's very different from the book. Because in the book, it's like the isolation and the cabin fever that makes him go crazy. But in this movie, he's crazy from the very beginning, right? And I think that's
that's
the
your yeah.
big difference from the book, right? That's why it's
Well,
a different story.
that's exactly the main reason I used. So any issue that I have with this film still stems from that, and um, that was my issue originally, was kind of like the two big things I had, two big issues I had with this film, where, well, he's kind of a little bit crazy already from the beginning, so it's not really like a proper journey. And two, that it's kind of mixed up between like this ghost story and this Shining, which are two like supernatural but completely unrelated things seemingly. But then on this viewing, I thought, well, maybe it could be both, right? Maybe it could be that he is kind of crazy from the beginning, and that is what allows the haunting or the shining of the place to be able to take over. Um, and so this was the first time that I kind of was like, well, if both of those things are true, then maybe it makes a little bit more sense. But there are any issues I had with this would be kind of more like at the plot level, right? Of like, kind of only get one. Why is there this shining, this psychic link that these two people have, and why is it completely unrelated to the Indian burial ground potential haunting history of the, like, it could be interpreted as two completely distinct things, and in one story I feel like that's too much. So that would be like my question to you. So like, did you ever have any, or did you always feel like this is like one thing?
I always felt like it was one thing. And isn't that the great mark of a great movie? So after like 10 watchings of it, like you've kind of changed your mind and you're thinking about it differently now. I don't know. I think that's pretty fascinating.
But here's the
actually,
thing.
that you watched
Here's
it,
the thing.
you thought about it, you were thinking about it differently now.
Well, here's the thing. It is very masterful and there's a lot in it. No one would say there's not a lot in it, but also I enjoyed it. I say I appreciated it more, like had fewer problems with this time, but I also enjoyed it less because of the interpretation that I had this time. Because this is something literally that I think my brain, what's the quickest way to say this? So I love horror, right? But I love horror because it's an escape, which means it doesn't touch on certain really real, really dark themes. And so this was the first time I ever watched it where like the potential sexual abuse angle seemed like evident to me in the actual film. And therefore I was like, well, I'm done. Like, I don't have any interest in this anymore, really, because like I can't take pleasure in it. If that's what the story's about, like I can't even like this movie anymore because it's so despicable to me. So that was like something I was dealing with, the last time I watched it.
I think it's really interesting hearing your angle, because if you're wanting an escapist film, like Kubrick is not the guy for you. He's not the guy for you. Like all of his films are so like in it
but
and
the
so
Stephen
intense.
King version of the story would
You're
be
right.
that,
Yeah,
right?
the Stephen King version of the story is not like that.
Like,
you're right.
The young version of my mind completely glossed over any potential for any of that stuff. Like I didn't interpret any of that. So I just thought, okay, this is a story about this guy, like you said, they go and the sort of the solitude drives him mad and everything. Like I was able to take it on that straightforward level to a certain extent and therefore enjoy it.
Yeah.
And then when I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to read into this darker stuff, now I can no longer enjoy it in a way. And I guess it's just like, well, that's because I'm not supposed to enjoy it. But that also makes me personally like it less. And I don't think Kubrick would have given a shit about that. But it's just the reality of me like viewing it.
Fascinating. Susie, any thoughts in general about Jack's performance and then just kind of the theming and what Dom was kind of talking about?
I've been writing a couple things down. Dom, you were saying about Jack Nicholson being kind of crazy from the beginning. And this time it really was like a conspicuous thing to me, where it was like, we already know to be concerned about Jack Nicholson. We already know that he's been violent toward his son. So it's like everybody's going to be in danger. We already know also that Shelley Duvall is going to be in danger just because of how she looks. You know what I mean? Where she's like so eager to explain away Jack's behaviors and things. And we're just like going like, lady, no. I was a little bit confused about the sexual abuse angle. I didn't know that was ever in anything. So I was like, oh, okay. And then also related to Dom, you were saying about like the Shining plus like the ghost angle and everything. And Halloran actually says that some places have a shine to them And so that's kind of like how I linked everything together, where it's sort of like, it's not merely like the building even, or the labyrinth, or even the land. It's just some places are just, they have a shine to them or
Yeah.
something, you know? So it's like, and then I don't need a whole lot more than that. And it doesn't like seem, like too many fingers and too many pies type of thing. So I get what you're saying, but I mean, just because of that, I was like attuned to that. And this time I wouldn't have known how to like address what you're saying previous to this watch,
Yeah.
because I didn't remember that Halloran line.
Exactly. No, the line you're pointing out is exactly the line that I also caught this time.
Mm-hmm.
And I originally, like, I think like you, I kind of just thought, like, I thought that was a throwaway as part of a general exposition. And that line this time actually allowed me to be like, oh, wait, this does make sense. Like, The Shining is not referring only to Danny and Scatman Crothers, it's the place itself, right? So that's why this is called The Shining. That's why all of this is happening, right? So that kind of let me sort of enjoy it as sort of like a thing that makes more logical sense. But so that, again, the sexual abuse angle that I caught this time, which I'm kind of still kind of part of me hoping that this is not necessarily true or the case,
Dom,
because I don't
can you
want it to
clarify
be.
just a little bit though? What exactly, like, are you
Yeah,
talking
so
about Jack's just general like abuse of women?
There's well, no. So there's two things, and I was reading about this a little bit today, actually. So the one thing that I had seen obviously before, because I've seen the movie, which is at the end there's the guy in the bear suit, going down on the guy in the bedroom, which is obviously disturbing. But honestly, to me, it was always less disturbing than a lot of the other stuff in the movie. Obviously, I just thought it was, well, there's debauchery going on as part of that 1920s party or something that we see. But there's also like a weird scene in the beginning. I think it's the very beginning, where he's waiting for his interview, where he's reading a Playgirl magazine. And there's even like a line, like one of the articles is about incest. Like one of the, yeah, like one of the, on the cover of the magazine, it's like incest, like why do parents sleep with their children or something like that. So
Just going right there.
yeah, so there's all
Okay.
sorts of there's text in the visual text in the film that's like, if that's what it's about, like if it's this disturbing allegory about sexual child abuse, like I just don't like that, just takes any type of interest out of it for me, because I'm just like, I don't want to see that or think about those things. And I get it, it's horror, right? But for me, like, it's the same reason I don't like watching uh Rob Zombie movies, right? Because they deal with like these things that are like rape and things like that are just, to me, it's like, once you're dealing with topics like that, they can't be fun anymore. And so, like, for me, this time watching it, I was like, oh shit, is this really about, like, is there stuff in the film that gives merit to a potential interpretation that Jack Nicholson is, um, actually not only physically abusing, but potentially sexually abusing Danny? And if so, like, that's just like, I don't want to like deal with that. Um, yeah.
Interesting, interesting. Ethan, yeah, please, I was
Yeah.
just about to go to you.
No, I just I have you just, Dom, you just sparked this whole. Has anyone here seen Room 237?
Oh no, that film. Like, I do not like. I'm the biggest fan of The Shining. I don't like that film.
No, I just this movie is so baffling because, like, as that documentary showed, uh, there are people who believe The Shining is Stanley Kubrick admitting that he faked the moon landing, right? Because there's like a shot, I forget, Danny's wearing like a rocket like a, yeah, at one point, and like the way it's framed, there's like a circular object. There are interpretations that the movie is about like the genocide of indigenous people, because there's like all these, um when Halloran is showing them around, like he's framed right next to this like giant thing of like Indian, like with the cartoon Indian on it, corn, and there's all this stuff of like the Bugs Bunny references and the Disney references. Like Danny's room is filled with his bedroom before he gets to the Overlook, but his bedroom is filled with like Mickey Mouse stickers and Goofy stickers. I mean, there's just so I'm of the opinion that like no interpretation of this movie is wrong, but I'm also like, was Kubrick just like a 1980s version trolling us
I
by
just
putting
think
all
that,
this stuff in there? Because
yeah, maybe. I just think people are reading too much into it. I think that film is that documentary is like about OCD people talking about OCD things. Like the chair was there, and then why did he move the chair? Like, who cares, dude? Just pay attention. You're missing you're missing the story, right? You should be
I
paying attention to the
agree.
story. Like that stuff is not really that important, you know. The
I
beans
found it
were like had a
exhausting.
certain
Yeah.
logo, and then in the other scene the beans had like who cares, you know?
No, yeah, I generally agree with that, and I'm not that type of like continuity nitpicky person, but I'm also sitting there thinking like, if he actually is reading a Playgirl magazine, like what the hell is that? Like you wouldn't be reading that up in public before an interview anyway. It wouldn't be in the lobby of the hotel, and it's also not something that would accidentally be on a film set. So like, what the hell is that? I mean, again, I hope it's nothing. I hope there's some like I don't want any of that to be a part of this film.
I think it's worse than you think think it is, Dom. I think it's a homecoming. I think it's about a serial killer coming home. So it's not like it's not about like this isolation that makes Jack go crazy. He's already crazy. It's I think it's more so kind of speaks to that innate primordial savagery of man, that he's a savage, and he forgot because he's in these walls of society, and these rules are surrounding him. But that's not who he is, right? He's going back home to serial kill. And I think that's the big difference between the movie and the film. It says a lot more, I think, about just man's capability to be evil. That's kind of what I took from it in the initial
I,
watching, and also comparing it with the book, because the book is much less complex. It's about an alcoholic that the ghosts and the demons are just basically a very simple metaphor for his alcoholism. And again, he gets cabin fever, and he goes crazy, and at the end he has this moment of clarity. I think he dies in the book too at the end. I don't remember, it was like 20 years ago, but he has this moment where things are better, and things are kind of, he's kind of figured things out. But that's really not what this movie's about.
yeah, I just want to add on. I read the book a long time ago. I don't remember it very well, but there was a mini series that King, I think, adapted himself in the late 90s with Steven Weber is his name, the guy from Wings. Um, he plays Jack, and it's god awful. I mean, it's like
I love
it's
that
like
movie.
an embarrassment. The TV movie,
It's
oh
great.
god, I was a kid and I was watching it and I was like, this is bullshit. I know what I mean. I was like, I it's very. I mean, and also in fairness, they had like TV movie budgets, so it looks very cheap. Um, I just thought it sucked all the air out of the thing. It's just like it goes out of its way to explain every single thing that could possibly be happening to this family at the hotel. And it's just a certain point. There's just all these like explosions at the end. I mean, maybe that's not in the book. I forget. Isn't there something in the book about like the topiaries come alive? Like there's like the book has just so much more. Like the hotel is this evil cursed
Yeah,
place, right?
yeah.
And then in Kubrick's version, he's like, no, the people bring the evil into the hotel, or at least Jack does. So that's not to say one version is better than the other, but I just remember all the press for the miniseries was like Stephen King is finally gonna fix everything wrong with the Kubrick Shining, and I watched the series, and I don't know, I was like a teenager, and I was like, this is really bad. And the last thing I'll say is, I wonder if there's some kind of animosity from King to Kubrick, because like Jack Torrance is clearly Stephen King, right? At least like in the book, or it's like his worst fear of what he'll become, what kind of man he'll become,
King
and
Torch
Kubrick's like, no, you're only Well, I'm saying when King was writing Torrance, he's like, this is what could happen to me if I like totally just, you know, lose myself in my work and forget my family, for example. And Kubrick is like, no, you're already there. Like you're already gone. You're already insane. Like, so part of me wonders if that's part of King's like animosity towards the book is or towards the movie. It's a little it's kind of insulting
Oh
to
yeah,
his
I would be super
avatar.
insulted. I would be super insulted if you took my movie and then made another completely different movie that has nothing to do with my movie. I would be livid, and he was livid. Like King was very upset. Um, and Diane Johnson, the novelist, was the screenwriter for this film, and I'm sure he was also upset that he wasn't part of that, right? So, by the way, I think
Yeah,
she did a great job, Diane Johnson. Like,
yeah. Did
yeah.
he ever? I feel like I remember reading he attempted an adaptation and either Kubrick rejected it. Does anyone know what the deal with that was?
I don't know.
I don't remember. Yeah.
But so like if this is about a serial killer coming home, because I haven't really thought of that interpretation, honestly, but it's interesting to me. Doesn't that make his son's shining even more incidental and like completely unrelated to the whole plot of the film?
I think The Shining is just an ability to see like past things, right? And it's interesting
and the
that
future.
Well,
yeah, and future things
and
too.
you can communicate. And you can
And you
communicate
can
with
communicate,
people, right?
and you can communicate.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that Danny has The Shining, right? But Jack has The Shining too, right? It's interesting how they
Well,
utilize it, but like
does
Danny,
he though, or does it just the place at that point? Because then Shelley Duvall, also Wendy, also sees things towards the end.
it's like
So it's
it's like
either
a messy
everyone has The
thing.
Shining, everyone has The Shining, or Danny definitely has The Shining, right? O'Halloran definitely has The Shining, but then I interpreted everything else as like not any person actually having The Shining, but the place, like the shine, like because Danny has The Shining before he ever gets to the place, but nobody else. We don't have any hint, at least in the movie, that anyone else does. But both Jack and Wendy see things. You know, towards the end, Wendy sees things. She sees a bunch of stuff at the end.
I
So
just
that's
kind of
kind of
chalk
like
that
the
up as
place.
like it's becoming like overwhelming and everyone's seeing everything, you know? I don't know. That's kind of
I think
how I
that's
thought about it. That's like,
yeah.
yeah.
The hotel's like it's like short circuiting. It like can't contain its ghosts anymore. So it's just like yeah, that's how
But
I
but but again, then like the fact that Danny has psychic abilities is completely unrelated. If it is about Jack coming home to this place, because again, he's been there since 1921, according to the photo at the end or whatever. Like, I don't know. One of the things I was reading as an interpretation, which again, I didn't really bother getting deep into, but it was the interpretation that the place wants Danny because of his strong cyclic ability. So it's almost like kill him so he'll be here with us type thing. I don't know that I buy that, but at least that could be a logical reason. I don't know. Like, do you? I guess is your interpretation that logical reasons are irrelevant?
I don't really care about it. Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. I'm more focused on like what Kubrick is trying to question. That's more interesting to me than the I don't know, the smaller kind of
But
things.
what is he trying to question? If like again and like if we're all saying like Jack is kind of crazy at the beginning and he gets more crazy, like is that enough for a
He's
protagonist?
not
Does it
getting more
not
crazy
matter?
though. I think it's just again, I think it's more of a forgetfulness. He's forgotten these things, so he's going back home to find it.
He does say, I mean, with to that interpretation, he does say he felt like he'd been here before. Everywhere he
Right.
turns,
He
like
has
you
been
know,
here
he
before. He's always been there. He's never
right,
left.
right. But I'm
Right.
saying like there are lots of things throughout the movie that kind of give that interpretation. I don't know. I saw one very short clip with Stephen King talking about the film, and obviously, as you said, he was very did not like the movie, and
Stephen King has like
but
he has Anne Frank syndrome. I think he genuinely believes that people are good at the end of the day. Like they're inherently there's a goodness about them. And Kubrick
well,
doesn't believe that.
well, here's the thing. Here's the clip. The clip was him saying, um, you know, what if they're actual ghosts and stuff like that? Like, what if this is hell potentially, right? And Kubrick's response was, well, Stephen, don't you think any story that involves ghosts is ultimately optimistic because it means that we've survived the afterlife in some way, right? And Stephen King was like, well, and he said, I don't believe in hell, you know? And Stephen King said, well, I do believe in hell, and some people do. And so you can't just like write off an entire possible thing because you don't believe it, right? But ultimately, that's what he did. And then he ends the clip by saying like he thinks The Shining is a very cold film, and literally, you know, Jack freezes at the end, whereas apparently in the book the place burns down. Um, I don't know. I am definitely on board with like Stephen King has tried to adapt. He's tried to do some screenplay stuff, and they've all been pretty terrible. Like Maximum Overdrive. Like he's proven pretty well that he's not good at filmmaking, and Stanley Kubrick has proven he's a master filmmaker. So I hesitate to take Stephen King's side on this, but I just know that it's easier for me to wrap my brain around the Stephen King version.
And you know, I
And maybe
understand
that's
why.
worse.
Like I
you know.
totally get it. Like I don't want to run around with Alex DeLarge while he's raping the whole town. Like his films are tough. They're tough watches. But there's like such a truthfulness there. Like at least he's kind of aspiring to ask those questions while other people don't. Stephen King doesn't. I'm sorry. Like none of his books that I read ever, ultimately they don't ask the important urgent questions to me, and that's the problem with King for me, and that's why I don't really care for his books too much.
Different thing, right? Stephen King is about entertaining,
Sure, and
whereas
I
Kubrick
understand,
is about
man.
art.
Yeah,
right?
they are different things. You're absolutely right. And like when I come home, like I want to turn on a fucking baseball game. You know, I don't want to like always watch this really kind of intense stuff where you're always thinking about this stuff. But I think you can't really, you know, deny
Well, that's
the
the thing.
importance of it, you know.
But that's what makes this film so special, I feel like, is because I was able to, up until this last viewing, enjoy it at an entertainment level because I was ignoring a lot of like the super, super, super dark things. Like I was able to be like, oh, well, there's a lot of weird shit in this movie. And so I'm just gonna chalk it up to like these are scary things that are happening, but not like dig in with like the questions. And so now it's like I might be able to like write an essay about it, or you know, give you reasons why it's even more artful than I thought previously. But like also I don't know if I'm ever going to want to watch it again. So it's it's like, why do you like, I'm just the wrong person, I think. Like my favorite Kubrick movie is Doctor Strangelove. So like I'm not there for like and Clockwork Orange I have very similar issues with, right? Like
Yeah.
there's so much darkness in that I've seen that movie in its entirety once, and I've seen lots of clips here and there, but no desire to revisit it because it's so dark that I'm
It's
just
such
like,
an
why am
important
I gonna
film though, right? I mean, like
again, I'm not disagreeing with you. It is so important and it's so masterful. And I started this by saying top 10 filmmakers of all time, but it's like it really just ultimately comes down to like why we sit down to spend a certain amount of 2.5 hours of our time to do something. And I don't know, maybe it's just at that point in my life now, but like I don't know. It's
or
tough.
Ethan
It was
too.
tough,
Like
I
Ethan, this
assume,
is our
for all
last
of
horror
you.
film, so don't worry. Susie,
No,
make sense of all of this for us, or nonsense.
I'm interested in what Dom's saying about it. I forget who you were quoting, but it being cold, because I also emotionally felt nothing. I feel like I said the same thing about The Exorcist, but it's like, for the most part, whenever I'm watching a movie, I want to know what is the relationship I'm tracking. And it's like, I don't absolutely need that. And maybe it's actually just to do with Kubrick's directing style, and like you can see his very intense OCD at work in anything he does, and it's like the mathematical almost precision with which everything is done is such it creates such an abstraction for me that I'm like, like you guys, all I can say is yes, masterful. But I'm just like, I'm able to just be like, next, in some weird way, even though it's like a lot of violence and unhappiness. And so it's sort of like you would think that it's like, yay, Wendy, she kind of did it, or something, but I didn't even feel that. I'm just sort of like, I feel like now she's just broken forever and that poor child has no one. And yeah, I don't know. I also felt cold.
That's a
But can I
good
ask you?
question.
I'm sorry, Dom. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we should, before we go, touch about how we felt about the ending. Because I did feel like, oh, at the very least, these two got away previously, and now I was able this time to take less satisfaction out of the ending. But again, in the entertainment version of it, it's like, oh, the guy froze to death and they got away, which is something at least.
But Susie, can I ask you? So I actually feel the opposite way. Like I feel like that care that he puts in, he's like cradling every like image like a little baby. I feel like the care that he puts into all of his images is so like, I don't know, there's a warmth to it. Actually, I don't feel like it's a cold movie whatsoever.
I feel the opposite,
Really?
completely the opposite.
Wow,
It's
that's
sort
so
of like
interesting.
you're so in love with this image and the placement of everything, including people and how they deliver their lines, that I'm like, you're not even letting a person live. Damn. You know what I mean? That's how I felt. It's sort of like even the calculated messiness of like the Torrance, like the household that we leave to go to the Overlook. It's sort of like, yeah, it's messy, it's friendly, and it's like, no, that was like within a millimeter of its life, like everything in that frame. So it's like,
That's
no, it looks fantastic, but ultimately it's like I feel nothing. And I've been like sitting here trying to figure out like what am I missing that I would feel something. But
did
I
you
mean, maybe
can I
like, so like you talking through it and why you feel something might kind of tap into why I'm not feeling anything.
can I like didn't you feel, because I feel like this is ultimately a love story, because Wendy is she's a pushover, right? Like she, every single scene she's Jack is just attacking and insulting, and she's just like, okay, like you said in the beginning, right? She doesn't really have a spine. I mean, would you agree? I mean, the thing
Well,
is
I
though,
mean,
when's the only time she gets upset at Jack?
it was because of Danny.
It's because of Danny, right? Like I felt
Yeah.
like that scene was so powerful to me, because she's a fucking pushover the entire movie. When it comes to Danny, she's not, right? Which is why she's such a fascinating character to me, because it's ultimately about like her like love for him, right? That eventually comes to,
I
and
might
that kind of
argue
leads to.
I
Go
might
ahead.
argue that it's like, well, your ass like stayed in that situation, so hello. No, whatever. It's um I hear what you're saying. It still does nothing for me.
Okay.
But no, I see what you're saying.
I agree with Susie, right? Like in terms of like if he is messed up from the beginning, then it almost becomes like, hey, why did you enable this? Like, why didn't you take this kid out of the
Oh, but that's not
situation?
fair, though. Is that
I
fair?
know it's victim
Yeah.
blaming, but I'm just saying, like again, in the simpler version of the narrative, he actually is kind of a good guy, and he's trying to recover from alcoholism, and it was really just a one-time
Yes.
slight pull, and that makes a little bit more sense in terms of like for her character. But
Mm.
if he's like insane from the beginning, you kind of do, again, it's not fair, but it's kind of legitimate to sit back and be like, wait, why are you still living in a house with this little kid with this guy who's
Because he's a
crazy?
psycho and he lies and he
Again,
hides
like
it.
there's lots of reasons. There's lots of reasons. It's just for me, it's a cleaner narrative if he does devolve. If he's not really devolved, if he was already an asshole in the beginning, then the sort of, like Susie said, like, well, what's the relationship that I'm tracking? Like, what are we doing here? Why are we watching this?
That's the big rule break, though, right? And that's like what his intention is. That's what, it reminds me of this Japanese movie called Sword of Doom. It's about a samurai serial killer and just goes around killing people, and that's essentially the movie. And people try to stop him, but they can't. because he has a secret technique that people can't stop. And that's what the movie's about. And it's I don't know, I can draw a lot of parallels to this movie. It's just about Jack and his
So it's just
evil.
death. It's just death.
Basically, yeah. And there's
Death is coming for you.
there's a like a poignancy and a realism to it, because that's really what it's like. Like most people don't get out of alcoholism. They die addicts. So I think there's just something there, like, that's just really painful and traumatic. And I think that's what he's exploring.
But they do get away. He doesn't, but they do.
Yeah, because of Danny and Wendy, right? And because of their love. And those are the two kind of, for me, like that's ultimately what I take away. Those are kind of the two opposing forces. And ultimately, at the end of the day, even if it's like a momentary thing, like Susie said, that kid's gonna be fucked up, and like, Wendy's already fucked up. So like, even if it's a momentary thing, there is a win there, right? Like there is a back and forth kind of interesting dynamic there between those two kind of forces. No.
It might just come down to the fact that I might have needed just like a half a scene or two that showed me them three as a happy family. Not even like, it could have literally been anywhere, like even during the horror bits almost, where it's like, just show me a glimpse. Because yes, it is true that in an abusive relationship, say, it's not going to be abuse 24 hours a day. Actually, nobody's like that. There are lots of moments of good, and I saw none, so it's sort of like, don't know why Wendy's sticking around. I know why Danny doesn't run to either parent for help, and he's got, Tony in his finger. So it's sort of like, if I'd seen that, but then of course it wouldn't have been a Kubrick movie, because he doesn't do that.
He goes out of his way to not do that, right? Like there's a scene where they're all riding over there in the car, and you're expecting that to be the moment that does just that, right? It's like, hey, it's a happy family, and instead he's just like, the kid says he's hungry from the back seat, and he's talking about cannibalism, and then he like yells, and I'm just like, Jesus, dude, calm down. But obviously that's brutal, right?
It's brutal. And he says, and the thing that strikes me about that scene is Danny wants something to eat. And it's a small thing. It's a small thing. He wants something to eat. You should have ate before we got in the car. Like, bro.
Like, he's like, you should have eaten your breakfast. And then he starts like smirking when he's talking about cannibalism. He's got this Jack Nicholson smirk on his face.
Isn't that the big rule break though? Isn't that the whole thing is like that? Right.
No, but I'm just saying, you can't have it both ways, right? You get the masterpiece version, the Kubrick version, but you also have to deal with like Susie and I both having this feeling of like emptiness, because we didn't get, like, you break the formula, right? That's what you get. But you break the formula, you don't get to also get us to be satisfied, which is the reason formula exists. And I don't think he's interested in satisfying us. But I'm just saying, now he's been dead a while, and he's got to sit, you have to deal with the fact that some people are unsatisfied watching your film.
This is making me more depressed than I thought it would. Yeah, I mean, I can see where you guys are coming from. Again, it's like none of his movies are easy watches. Ethan, I know you have to go in a few minutes. Do you want to kind of give some closing thoughts here?
Oh boy. I'm a fan of this movie. I don't know if it's in my like personal Kubrick. I guess I've always been more fascinated by it than truly enamored with it. I just I prefer like 2001, for example, just in terms of like Kubrick stuff, because I don't know, it's not there's more there. I don't know why. I can't articulate myself, but something I learned. I watched the little bits of the commentary that's on the Blu-ray, and it's a Kubrick biographer, and
I'm sorry.
It's a Kubrick biographer, and the guy who invented the Steadicam.
Oh wow, yeah. Steadicam, yeah.
Yeah, so he just really quickly, he tells this horrible story about when Kubrick would do these shots that combined like Steadicam, like following someone into a room, and then the operator, the Garrett, I forget his last name, Garrett something. The operator would then have to become the tripod. So he was like, "You're doing these like marathon Kubrick takes, and I'm sitting there. I've walked into the room with the Steadicam rig, and then I have to stop and be perfectly still and not like tilt or shake it off. He's like discs are like popping out of my back. He's like, I can't. And I was just, yeah, this movie did not seem very fun to me. That was just a random anecdote.
Kubrick was a
But
madman.
something, oh yeah, the biographer talks about a lot about how the relationship between Danny and Jack, that was informed by Kubrick's relationship with his father. So I, and which probably says all you need to know about how Kubrick felt about his, yeah. So so hearing that, but like I don't know how much of that is like tangible to a viewer. But it does make me want to watch it again to like pick up on that stuff and see how personal it is, and
I
how
still
if it's just like hidden in there, or if it's, you know, because I think there's one more thing I was gonna say about the Wendy character is there was all that stuff that came out about the behind the scenes footage
yeah.
of Kubrick like screaming at her, and I don't know if it was Shelley Duvall's daughter or if it was
It was
Kubrick's
Kubrick's
daughter, the
daughter.
woman who shot.
It was Kubrick's
Right,
daughter. Yeah.
she was like all the narrative. Well, I don't know. Recently there was like someone put out a statement that was like the narrative has always been that Kubrick like beat Shelley Duvall, like tormented Shelley Duvall into giving that performance, like, and whoever it was either Duvall's daughter or Kubrick's daughter. They were like, that takes away so much from Shelley Duvall as a performer, like that takes away all of her agency to be like she could only get to this place because Kubrick was tormenting her. And I think Shelley Duvall might be the heart of the movie. I know
He
that
is.
she's not the, yeah, she's not the, she doesn't do what we want her to do. But my heart breaks every time like she tries to appease Jack and he just like spits it right back in her face. I mean, it's heartbreaking. And Shelley Duvall is the kind of performer that um her face is just, I mean, she has one of the most incredible faces I think in like the history of movies. Like it's there's like there's so much, there's weakness, there's like this odd energy. I don't know. I find her very fascinating. So I guess to sum up, uh Shining is something that has always fascinated me, and I guess I view it more as a as like this puzzle that I'll never solve. But I'm okay with that because like, you know, that's part of the, like, the movie's dealing with the afterlife, right? The movie's dealing with these questions that we can't really ever answer.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that conversation. If you found it interesting, informative, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing. It'll really help us out. And we have some very cool conversations lined up for you guys. So I hope you're looking forward to it, and I'll see you next time.